For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined by Chris Treviño for instant analysis after USC's Tuesday practice of the Wisconsin week and coming off of the Michigan loss from this past Saturday. It's kind of cold and chilly and feels like fall for the first time, Chris. I don't know if it's just a little bit more gloomy after USC's first loss of the year, but we got to see part of practice, talk to Lincoln Riley, offensive players. I'd like to start, what were your practice observations?
Well, to start with the weather, I feel fine, Jack. Brought out the CBS pullover. Feels great. But in terms of the observations, always after the first loss of the season, I always want to see how the team comes out to practice. You know, we note that all the time, but after the first loss is really the first kind of interesting time to watch them come out. And I just want to see, are they mad? Are they down? Are they still joking around? Are they energetic? Are they focused? What's the vibe of the team? And for the most part, I got that they were pretty upbeat. You know, not a lot of jokes. You know, on the field, you saw a little bit of dancing. They were having a good time, so I feel like they've fully shaken off, you know, what happened in Michigan. You know, tough loss, heartbreaking loss, emotional loss. But at the same time, season's still ahead. It's only 3 games in. You have to move forward. You got Wisconsin coming to the big Coliseum, let's call it that. But you got them coming. Can't really dwell on a loss, your first one of the season. Still a lot of football left to be played. And I thought they came out pretty energetic, pretty upbeat. You know, Lincoln Riley came out jogging, eager to get to practice. So I think they were eager to get back on the field, get back to work after, you know, something didn't go their way on the road, but still have to play. Still have to play, Jack.
First thing that Lincoln Riley was asked about, unsurprisingly, injury updates, because USC saw a couple of guys go down with injury. Mekhi Lemon and Lake McCree with what seemed to be maybe tougher injuries, bigger injuries, and Achille Arnold, who got banged up a couple of times and had to leave the game at the end. And he did give us some injury updates on those guys.
For sure. Didn't specifically mention Mekhi, but, you know, going with the assumption, head injury, a scary one at that. He is highly doubtful for this game. I put him at out. Probably won't see him for a couple of weeks. Lake McCree, you know, he did give a little more context. He did talk about him on the Trojans live show yesterday, said they will get him back this season. It is not a season-ending injury, but he gave a little more context, said they won't have him back for a, quote, couple weeks. Now, that seems like a short time, so I don't know if how he's using couple, if he's using it as 2, or maybe it's 4 weeks. I'm not sure. But, you know, to take a helmet hit on the knee is really tough, and for them, they are pretty lucky that it was not a season injury for a guy who has had 2 knee surgeries in his football career. So that's the good news. You know, they have that young tight end room they have to rely on. And then with Achille Arnold, did not specify what his injury was. I feel like it's some sort of shoulder, upper body injury, but said he's improving rapidly and that they hope to have him this weekend. He will be limited for this week. So seems like it's going to be a game time kind of decision for him, the starting safety for that secondary.
Yeah, Lincoln did mention that Lake McCree was lucky not to have a worse injury, and he kind of signaled out that one hit as something that probably shouldn't be around in college football. So there's nothing really illegal about it, but it doesn't do any good for college football. It can only do harm, and he didn't seem like he was a fan of how low the hit was, you know, towards that area of Lake's legs, but did mention that they're probably lucky he isn't out for the season.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Watch the tape, literally like a helmet to knee hit. It's so dangerous, but, you know, he can't blame the Michigan player. You know, that's a legal hit. He can do that in college. So maybe we'll see that change in the future. But yeah, they are extremely fortunate that their starting tight end will be back at some point this season. The other 2 kind of quick injury updates I want to note is that freshman Carlin Jones was back out in full pads. He has been out for quite some time with a boot on his foot. He was out of the boot in full pads. And then Kalolo Taaga, the freshman offensive tackle, who we have not seen all of fall camp, all this season because he was injured in the offseason with his own boot, but he is back out in full pads. Looks like he was a full participant after doing conditioning drills last week to get his conditioning up before hitting practice. So good to have 2 big guys back in the trenches for USC.
The other big thing that Lincoln Riley was asked about a couple of times and gave answers that were probably the most animated that I've seen from him in the last couple of years was about Bear Alexander. And for the first few weeks of the season, Bear Alexander, I don't think it's had the statistical impact that a lot of fans were expecting, probably because, you know, they built him up as this guy that could be the best defensive tackle in the country, could rack up a ton of sacks, even though he only had 1.5 last year. And a lot of his kind of numbers last year were on pressures and just being disruptive. We've seen a snap count a little bit lower in this new defense, and so a couple times him and Danton Lynn have been asked about the snap count for Bear Alexander. He was asked about it again today and also asked about some of the stuff that's going on social media with Bear posting some cryptic messages and Bear's dad and guardian posting some stuff about Bear. And Lincoln Riley, I think, as animated as I've ever seen him, was basically saying there's no story there and really wanted, I think, the media and everybody to stop digging around on what's going on with Bear Alexander.
Yeah, definitely kind of the most animated we've kind of seen him. I believe he got 2 kind of questions for it. The second one being about, the stuff that's being posted on social media and kind of, former USC linebacker and safety Deion Bailey, they're kind of having back and forth on Twitter about, Bear needing to play more or Bear wants to play, have more effort. So it's Twitter battling right now. A lot of Twitter fingers going on. So, yeah, I can see since there was sort of frustration, this isn't a story. There isn't a story. And, we kind of mentioned, they're better than they were last season. And if you want to play on this defense and you want to get snaps on this defense, you have to perform. And it should be hard to play D-line at the University of Southern California. So that was kind of the message that, they are a competitive front. They are a competitive defensive line. They are good players across the board. And if you're not playing in practice, you're not going to get on the field come game days. And he did point out that Bear played a third of the game. 21 snaps, I believe, is the exact number. But, yeah, we haven't seen Bear play these much higher snap counts like they did last year, where he was kind of the only kind of good thing they had going on the defensive front. So obviously it's changed this year. USC's defense is finally good, so you have more leeway to not really drain him. But I just think it's as simple as Bear needs to produce more in practice and step up his play, because everyone around him is stepping up as well.
Yeah, I did think he was his most disruptive this season on Saturday against Michigan. I mean, watch the tape. There were many plays where he was in the backfield, and there's not. Michigan only dropped back to pass the ball 12 times, so it's hard for a D tackle to get in there for a sack or anything like that. So it is more than just how many times you're bringing the quarterback down, how many TFLs you have. But as Lincoln Riley mentioned, it should be harder to play D-line at USC. He said that wasn't the case last year, and they weren't very good, and that's probably why. So I think he's impressed with what they have on the defensive line, Bear included. And he mentioned if you see a guy out there, it's because they have impressed us in practice, they've shown us stuff in games, and we want them to be out on the field. It doesn't mean that somebody else isn't doing a good job as well. It's just a matter of guys that have impressed them.
Over under 21 snaps for Bear this weekend?
That's a good question. I'm going to say over.
Okay.
Because 21, that's got to be one of his lowest games at USC. So the math would just suggest, based on averages, that he plays a little bit more. The other thing is, though, they did see, Michigan took a lot of snaps in that first half, but they kept going 3 and out in the second half. So there just weren't many defensive snaps in the second half in general until that final drive, which was about 10 plays. And I think if you're looking at, this scheme that D'Anton Lynn runs, it's all about the defensive tackles eating up space. They're not moving a whole ton. They're not getting around their guys. They're just eating up space, sometimes pushing them backwards, and the linebackers open it up. I feel like what we saw from Bear Alexander last year is he was so good at getting around a center or getting around a guard. But sometimes that means maybe you leave the lane you're supposed to be in. So I do wonder a little bit about, is he a scheme fit for this D'Anton Lynn defense as much as he would have been last year in Alex Grinch's defense? Maybe D'Anton Lynn prefers guys that are just big bodies, eat up space in the middle, and he knows what he's going to get from them, and the fact that he knows where they're going to be on every play, and they're not going to kind of be out of their lane. So I don't know. It's hard to know exactly the workings of the scheme and what the coaches are looking for, but I'm going to say over. I feel like they need him to play a little bit more, and they need a little bit of pass rush from the inside to free up the edge rushers as well. Sure,
that sounds fair, and that's a great assessment of everything you just said. So I'll go around at least double-digit more sacks, so maybe around 35, pushing to 40 kind of 40 snaps for Bear.
Not sacks. Snaps.
No, not sacks. Snaps, not sacks. 40 sacks, though, then you have to play him all the time.
Yeah, especially if it's all in 1 week. That would be big. The other big part of the game that was talked about with Lincoln Riley was the offensive line, talking about some of the younger guys that came in, also talking about the confidence of some of the younger guys that had to be benched. What did you take away from what Lincoln had to say about the O-line?
Well, obviously that is the biggest storyline kind of coming out of the Michigan game. The USC offensive line got whooped for 95% of that game, and they played better in the second half after throwing some last minute changes in there with Tobias Raymond coming in, Amos Talele playing a lot more on the interior, Mason Murphy going to left tackle. So they got it done. They took the lead. Obviously the offense was able to score after making those changes, help out Miller Moss after getting bull rush in the first half there, but still it wasn't a performance you're writing home about. And if you go by PFF grades, one of the worst performances of all time. I don't know how much you buy into a 0 pass blocking grade, because that would imply that they blocked literally no one when they did. But anyway, it's obviously something that needs to be fixed, and Lincoln Riley talked about how that group has to be better, and it goes all around, not just players but also coaches. And you also put that blame on him as well for not putting the offensive line in good positions with some of his play calling throughout that game. So overall, that's going to be the remaining major storyline for USC moving forward. Is this offensive line is going to go as far as they'll take them, because if the offensive line struggles, they can't move the ball. Everything goes on the defense, and then you got a run down defense. As much confidence as they have, they can't save the game every week. So the offensive line needs to do some soul searching. We didn't see any team offensive line period, so we can't even comment on if there were any changes. I kind of feel like they're going to keep the status quo, go back to the original lineup, but I feel like maybe they'll play a little bit more Tobias Raymond, because I think he earned more time to see him out there, so maybe we'll see him a little bit on Saturday. But yeah, he has all the belief, Lincoln Riley does, in that group, that they can be a high-level group. Going back to what he saw against in the LSU game, he thinks they can still play to that level and get further than that as well. But, they just got to get the confidence going again. He doesn't feel like their confidence is going to take a hit. But, after a game like that, you have to kind of find a way to move forward. And I would not be shocked if, they took a little bit of a confidence hit. And so Wisconsin would be a perfect chance for them to get that confidence back. They're not a formidable defensive line. They're not Michigan, and Michigan's going to be one of the best defensive lines they face. So this will be a perfect weekend to get that going back in the friendly confines of the Coliseum and against a inferior defensive line. Get that confidence going, Jack. Sometimes you need an easy one.
Lincoln did mention that for a young offensive lineman, that was about as hard as it gets, going to the Big House and facing what he said is probably the best defensive line in the country, which we can certainly attest to. I thought it was interesting, too. He mentioned that Elijah Page was cramping pretty bad in that first half. They wanted to get him more snaps in the second half. They didn't want to fully phase him out, but he just couldn't go, so it seemed like the cramps were pretty bad, and maybe that's something that takes an adjustment going forward. I don't know if that's a hydration thing or what. It wasn't super hot. It was kind of humid, but a little surprising to hear that. Jonah Monheim talked about, the young offensive linemen and their confidence. He didn't say a whole ton, but just that he was young once. He was an offensive lineman that had his struggles in the past, so he's trying to help them keep their heads up. And then Miller Moss on Tobias Raymond. I thought one of the cooler notes of him today is the night of the game, despite the loss, he texted Tobias Raymond and said, "Hey, I'm really proud of you. I'm proud of the way that you stepped up for the team. That's not a super fair spot for you to be put in." He didn't say fair, but almost a really tough spot for you to be put in, and he thought he handled it well and stepped up when the team needed him.
Yeah, absolutely, and that just goes to, we're talking about offensive line, but that just shows kind of the leadership of Miller Moss and, how much he loves these guys and how much they kind of, respect him, and that's why he is QB1 and why he's the leader of this team in that locker room and on the field, because, he has that kind of relationship with the guys. But, yeah, a lot of credit to Tobias Raymond and Amos Taulele, too, for playing in a tight spot. But Tobias showed some stuff, so I hope he does get some, reps. This is a guy who had not played any meaningful snaps, and then you're just going, Big House, go, get in there, we need you. Our offense is dying out there. And, he didn't play like All-American level, but he definitely gave them something that they weren't getting in the first half, and that's why they were able to have more success in the second half. So I hope we see Tobias Raymond, number 73, in the Coliseum this weekend, because I think he's earned it. But you're right, young guys, sink or swim. For the most part, they sunk on Saturday, but hopefully that leads to them being more confident moving forward, getting their confidence back, and then swimming, because they need that offensive line to carry them.
It was such a jam-packed day. I wanted to ask Lincoln Riley about Alex Grinch and facing him, and maybe what kind of an impact that will have on Wisconsin's ability to game plan, considering that Grinch knows a lot of what Lincoln wants to do. Didn't get a chance to ask that. There were a lot of questions flying around. It was loud with construction everywhere. Did get to talk to other players like Woody Marks and Miller Moss and Jonah Monheim. Was there anything else that really stood out to you in a big way you feel like the fans need to know about from today?
Well, talking to Woody about that play he made was obviously maybe a fun thing to talk about. I know you talked to him about that, but I think that's kind of a fun thing that happened out of practice, because we didn't get to talk to him after the Michigan game. Yeah,
he said that he was asked about going and making the play, stripping Kenneth Grant, who's the 330-pound defensive tackle for Michigan, used to be 365, and he just kind of laughed, and multiple different times he said, "Yeah, he's not a natural ball carrier. He's not carrying the ball every down. He's not an every down ball carrier. So I figured I can go and strip the football." And then he kind of later led on that because he's so big, he also thought, no way I'm going to be able to tackle him. So he thought his best chance was to go over and strip. But Miller Moss called it one of the most heads up, one of the most courageous, one of the most tough football plays he's ever seen in terms of what it meant for the team, and Woody Marks just going and laying it all out on the line and making such a heads up play. But it was pretty funny. Woody Marks was actually asked about it multiple times and kind of gave the same answer. The second time he was just laughing even more. Like, he didn't want to be disrespectful, but he's like, he's 330 pounds. He's not a natural ball carrier. He's like, he plays defense.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, I've said this on Tunnel Vision. If they had won, that play would be, considered an even greater status in terms of, football lore, USC
that's
football lore.
That's like the Nealon Nudge level kind of play.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we need a catchy nickname. I can't think of anything on the spot. Woody Swipe isn't great. It needs the alliteration. Yeah. Okay, don't beat me up so bad.
Or the rhyme, because Bush Push doesn't have alliteration. But
sure. Yeah, I'll think about it. But again, if they had won, that would have gotten an alliteration or a cool nickname right off the bat, because they don't win without that play, and they don't come back without that play. And obviously the score, the comeback came up short. So I just wish they had one, so that play would be just that much more crazy. But it was still a great play, and it's one that'll be on highlight tapes, and they'll play that on his draft thing. And yeah, Miller Moss calling it one of the greatest heads-up plays that he's ever seen. That's a cool thing too.
I've seen double fumble, but I feel like that doesn't really give Marks the credit for the play. It's a funny way to term the play.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll try to think of something just for the fun of it, because I think it needs something.
Comment section, you got to be on that, and we'll try and think of something as well. But I think that'll mostly do it for us today. It was a chilly day. We'll have more from Danton Lynn tomorrow. I'm sure it'd be good to talk to him about those big plays and how he felt like the USC defense played, because Lincoln Riley was very confident about the defense and mentioned just how well he thought they played outside of a couple plays where Michigan was able to kind of take advantage and have those big plays. And like every USC fan and like a lot of people around the country was saying, if we make that one more play, whether that's the stopping them on fourth down, not allowing the 63-yard run, everyone here is talking about it completely differently. He said he thought they played a C-level game and went in there and, we're one play away from beating Michigan in the Big House, and Miller Moss kind of had that same thing to say. But unless you have anything else, I think we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think that's it. If this guy ever challenges you to laser tag for money, do not. He is hustling you. He is a laser tag shark. So that's all my notes.
Chris thinks it's the height. I think I'm just better than him. But he was really excited to play laser tag. I actually kind of felt bad for how bad the score was at the end of it. But we were the red team, and we were playing the blue team. Didn't go the same for USC against Michigan, but we'll see if they can rebound this week against Wisconsin. He's Chris Treviño. I'm Jack Smith. Make sure you're checking out USCfootball.com for more.